Does low turnover equate to high employee engagement?
Yeah. So the answer is no.
Really?
Let me explain. Now, there are things with tenure. There are some connections with, I learn my job, more and I get better at it. So there's some things with performance. There are things with, low turnover as you get, this idea of, well, I can staff, because that's pretty important. I can make sure that I have people who are going to be there to answer the phones. But does it truly impact this, engagement and performance? And we can always talk about some of our analysis and research, but I'll just instantly bring in, a big thing right now that is going on is this whole concept of quiet quitting. And this whole social media kind of thing, and Gen Z is a big influencer in all of this, is, you know what? I'm not going to quit my job. Don't really like my job. I'm not going to quit it. I am just going to do the minimal effort to actually do the job, not I'm deciding not to do the job. No, I'm going to do it.
Right.
But I am not going to put in myself the extra effort and, as I call this, hustle culture. So I am going to just quietly quit. And Gallup has been measuring this quiet quitting. And in a recent article, they just said they believe quiet quitting is 50% of the American workforce and that it's growing. So,
so it's not going away. This whole quiet quitting started about a year or half ago. It still sounds like it's going on.
Exactly. So if we say, hey, people are staying with us, they're not leaving, therefore we get great engagement, and therefore that goes into performance because that's a leading indicator of performance. It's like, what if all your people are quiet quitting?
Yeah.
What do you do about that?
Yeah, we found, you mentioned some of our measures. I mean, we have been measuring over the last several years this idea of the intent to quit. And what we have found is that, of course, not everyone who intends to quit quits. There is a relationship. Yep. We have found a correlation, a very tight correlation between intent to quit and intent to engage with customers. So that's interesting. We've also found it, by the way, the intent to quit amongst supervisors is also correlated to their intent to engage with their team. So it's not just a customer engagement phenomena. What that means is if you intend, you can't hold two thoughts in your mind at once. I want to get out of here and I want to engage with people around me. You just can't. What we have found, though, is people don't quit, and yet they still have this high intent to quit.
Yeah.
And that is pretty much the definition of the quiet quitting. And we have seen that growing, and it is certainly something that is related to their employee experience.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting is you mentioned the work at home. Gallup even said, the people who are more disengaged are the people actually not working at home.
Yeah, I've seen that.
The people in the center. Right. And it just takes you back to this whole context of, and so I just have a quick question because I know you, I always turn to you for a lot of these kind of answers is, because people say employee engagement and they throw that around. What do you think is kind of a good definition of employee engagement?
The common definition, or at least one that you see around a lot, is some sort of commitment to work, which can be measured on commitment scales, commitment to the company, commitment to the work, but also is measured in the amount of work you're willing to give. And so for some, it's a bit the desire to go above and beyond what you're being asked. So not just doing enough to get the job done, but looking around and seeing what else can be done. And so this gets really kind of muddy. How do you measure these kinds of things?
Yeah. Now, if you have really high employee turnover, you probably have an engagement problem.
Probably. Yeah.
But you also have lots of other problems.
Right.
The spiral of doom of, oh, well, if you can't staff, and then the stress and the burnout that it places, on the organization, and it starts to move, and I stole that term from you, that downward spiral of turnover.
Yeah.
So, ultimately, I think that's just what we wanted to point out is, we continually say we do all of these great things for our employees and they're staying with us and therefore they're engaged. And that's not necessarily the case.
And I think we should focus on that in a future episode and explain a little bit more about what we're saying. Correct.
So, I guess said a different way is, how do you get employee engagement? What is the right way? So, all right. Well, hey, continue with us, on this journey. Once again, give comments, subscribe, and, next episode, we'll dive deeper into this whole idea of how do you make this a great job for the people in the industry. So, until next time, take care.